Hey 2B friends, it's Miss Paris. I'm back to read some more chapters from A to Z Mysteries, The Jaguar's Jewel by Ron Roy. We've already looked at chapters 1, 2, and 3, and we left off, if you guys remember, Josh, Dink, and Ruth Rose have gone to New York to visit Dink's uncle, Warren, and he works in a museum. So if you guys remember, what we left off with is they were visiting different sites in New York City, and Uncle Warren got a package from the Incan tribe, and it contained a jaguar and this jewel and some other things in it. Well, when Dr. Pitts arrived to assess what was sent to the museum, he realized that this stone right here, this jewel, was a fake. So that's where we left off from chapter 3. We're going to pick up with chapter 4. So here we go. Chapter 4. What do you mean? Dink's uncle answered. I don't see how it could be fake. Dr. Pitts rested a finger on the jewel. This is not the original emerald, he explained. In fact, it is not an emerald at all. But how could that be? Dink's uncle cried. Look, I will show you, Dr. Pitts said. He took a small flashlight from his pocket. Will you please pull the shades and turn off the lights, he asked. Dink was closest to the windows, so he pulled the shades down and clicked off the light over the fish tank. Josh hurried over to the switches on the wall. When the room was dark, Dr. Pitts turned on his flashlight and shone the beam on the jewel. Suddenly, the flashlight went out. Dink heard something hit the desktop, then roll off and make a soft thud on the carpet. Sorry, Dr. Pitts muttered. I seem to have dropped my flashlight. Can someone please? I'll get it, Josh said in the dark. He knelt down and fumbled around under the desk. Found it, he said a moment later. He stood, switched it on, and aimed the light at the desk. Thank you, young man, Dr. Pitts said. He took the flashlight and pointed it at the jewel once more. You see, if this were a real emerald, the light would penetrate, he explained. The light beam would go to the heart of the jewel. He tapped a finger against the jewel. But this is just glass. Notice how the light bounces off the surface? The light does not enter the stone. He shone the light on his own face. Of course, that is just my opinion. You are welcome to get another, Mr. Duncan. I certainly will, Dink's uncle said. He walked over to the wall and switched on the lights. Dink blinked at the sudden brightness. His uncle looked very upset. But I simply can't understand how the real emerald could have been switched for a fake one, Dink's uncle continued. Are you absolutely sure? Dr. Pitts nodded. Unfortunately, yes, I am sure. Then the swap must have taken place before the crate arrived, Uncle Warren declared. Perhaps it happened in South America when the Jaguar was wrapped. Dr. Pitts shook his head. I'm sorry, but I was there for the packing. I assure you, when the Jaguar was put into this crate, the emerald was real. Dink's uncle stared at the Jaguar. I just don't see how it was possible, he repeated. Dr. Pitts shrugged. Of course, I will have to report this to the police, he said, if you want that second opinion. Dink's uncle hurried across the room and opened the door to James Pride's office. James, please call Empire Jewelry on Broadway. Ask Regina Wu to come immediately. Tell her it's urgent. While they waited, Dr. Pitts examined the lock on the office door, then wrote something on a small pad. Uncle Warren slumped in his chair and stared at the statue. The kid sat on the rug and waited. Dink wanted to say something to his uncle, but he looked too upset. Long minutes passed, then a knock sounded at the door. Uncle Warren jumped up. He let in a tall woman wearing a black raincoat. Warren, I came as fast as I could, she said. These streets are a mess. They shook hands, and Dink's uncle explained about the Jaguar's jewel. Dr. Pitts claims it's a fake. May I? Using the jeweler's magnifying glass, Miss Wu examined the stone for a few minutes. Then she removed a small bottle from her pocket and squeezed a drop of liquid onto the jewel. When the liquid dried, she wiped the stone with a cloth. She shook her head. "He's right," she said. "This is a glass replica." Uncle Warren fell back in his chair. "I am simply dumbfounded. Where did the switch take place? How? Who could possibly?" "Pardon me," Dr. Pitts said. "The lock on the door does not appear to have been forced. Who besides you has a key to this office?" "Mr. James Pride, my assistant for one," Dink's uncle said, "and my friend, Jean-Paul. He owns the restaurant next door to the museum. He let the delivery man into my office yesterday." "So, this Jean-Paul has a key?" Dr. Pitts asked. Uncle Warren shook his head. "Not to keep. I lent him my key since the crate was due while James and I were away from the museum." "So 2 people besides yourself had access to the Jaguar, is that right?" Dr. Pitts asked. "Your assistant and your friend?" "That is correct, but I assure you neither of them has touched that statue. The idea is absurd." Excuse me, Uncle Warren," Dink said. Everyone turned to look at Dink. "Wouldn't there be fingerprints? I mean, if someone did take their real jewel, they'd leave fingerprints on the fake one, right?" No one spoke for a minute. Then Dr. Pitts smiled at Dink. "That's an excellent idea," he said, "and I think we should ask the police to look for fingerprints. They will, of course, find mine. But unless I miss my guess, no others." "Why do you say that?" Ruth Rose asked. "Because, young lady," Dr. Pitts said, "this thief was very clever, and clever thieves wear gloves." Uncle Warren nodded at the phone. "Please call the police," he told Dr. Pitts. "They will prove that Jean-Paul and James are innocent." Dr. Pitts looked at Dink's uncle. "Excuse me, sir, but there is another suspect." "And who would that be?" Uncle Warren asked. "Yourself," Dr. Pitts said quietly. "Ooh, I wonder who it was. I wonder where this jewel went. Let's see if they find anything out in Chapter 5. Here we go." Dink heard thumping footsteps on the stairs just before 2 police officers entered the office. They listened to the story, then invited Dink's uncle down to the police station to answer more questions. "Mr. Duncan, will you ask Mr. Pride and Jean-Paul to come with us?" one of the officers asked. "I will," Dink's uncle said, "but believe me, this is a horrible mistake." The officer nodded, pointing to the statue. "We'll have to take this too. We'll check it for prints at the station." What about us?" Regina Wu asked. "Are Dr. Pitts and I free to go?" "Of course." Oh, sorry guys, gotta reread. "What about us?" Regina asked. "Are Dr. Pitts and I free to go?" "I have your addresses," the officer said. "We know where to find you." "Of course," Dr. Pitts said. He and Regina Wu left. Uncle Warren walked over to Dink. "Don't worry, nephew. This shouldn't take long," he said. "Stay with Yvonne until I get back." When he bent down to hug Dink, he whispered, "Donnie, remember your cookie." James Pride locked the office, and they all walked down the stairs. The 2 officers carried the rewrapped Jaguar. Jean-Paul hugged Yvonne, then joined Uncle Warren and James Pride in one of the police cruisers. Dink, Josh, Ruth Rose, and Yvonne watched them drive away in the rain. "Come inside," Yvonne said. "I will make something warm to drink. The men will be back in a jiffy, yes?" She fixed the kids big mugs of hot chocolate. They sat at the window and watched the rain fall. "Try not to worry," Yvonne said. "When the men return, then we solve the mystery, yes?" She left the kids and passed through a blue curtain into the restaurant's kitchen. "This is so weird," Josh said. "It stinks," Dink said. "I know my uncle wouldn't steal some dumb jewel." "But what happened to it?" Ruth Rose said. "Someone stole the real one." The kids sipped their hot chocolate and looked through the rain-streaked glass. Dink stood up. "I wonder where the bathroom is." "Ask Yvonne," Ruth Rose said. "I think she's in the kitchen." Josh slurped up the last of his drink. "And see if she has any more hot chocolate," he asked. Dink walked toward the back of the restaurant. He passed through the blue curtain into the kitchen. A pile of chopped broccoli sat on the counter next to the bowl of peeled raw onions. He looked around, but Yvonne wasn't there. He saw another blue curtain, so he picked through it, looking for the bathroom. Just then, he heard a noise. Dink turned around and saw Yvonne slip through a narrow door. When the door closed behind her, it disappeared. Dink blinked his eyes. The door was gone. There was no frame, no knob, no hinges. He shook his head. Was he seeing things? Dink found the bathroom, used it, then hurried back to Josh and Ruth Rose. "Guys, listen to this." Dink told them about Yvonne and the vanishing door. After she shut the door, it disappeared. Honest. "Disappearing doors?" Josh scoffed. "Maybe it's her private bathroom or something," Ruth Rose said. Suddenly, Dink remembered what his uncle had said to him. "When my uncle hugged me upstairs, he whispered, 'Remember your cookie,' in my ear." Josh grinned. "Maybe he was hungry," he said. "Or maybe he was telling you to remember the fortune in your cookie," Ruth Rose said. "I saved it," Dink said. He reached into his jacket pocket. "What?" Dink pulled out his uncle's brass keyring. "Where'd this come from?" "That looks like the key to your uncle's office," Josh said. "You're right," Dink said. "He must have dropped it into my pocket when he hugged me." Dink reached back into his pocket and pulled out the slip of paper from the fortune cookie. "Your eyes will play tricks on you," he read. "Your fortune is already coming true," Ruth Rose said. "I wonder if mine will. I'm supposed to find a treasure." "Look," said Josh suddenly. He pointed out the window. "There's that jewelry lady." Regina Wu hurried past the restaurant. The kids watched her slip inside the green door that led up to Uncle Warren's office. "Why is she going back up there?" Dink asked. Just then, Yvonne came through the blue curtain. She was carrying a pitcher and a plate of cookies. "More hot chocolate?" she asked. "And some of my special cranberry cookies." So here's that picture of Josh, Dink, Ruth Rose. They're all sitting at the table, and here is Regina Wu when they saw her walking through the streets. I wonder why she's going up to their uncle's office. Curious. While Josh and Ruth Rose reached for the cookies, Dink stared out the window at the green door. Suddenly, the door opened, and Regina Wu stepped back outside. She closed the door behind her, then hurried away from the building. Dink watched her dash up the street, raising her umbrella. He stared after Regina Wu. What's going on? He wondered. Why would she go up to the office when she knows my uncle isn't there? Suddenly, another thought struck him. Unless she went up to the office because he isn't there. And that's the end of chapter 5. So we'll have to find out what Regina Wu was doing up there at Uncle Warren's office, and if Josh, Dink, and Ruth Rose can solve the mystery. Bye!